Hello and welcome to Calls. This is the 2022 Mexico Open DFS Tactics Show. We're a day early, but we're going to do the best we can. Some of these projected ownerships are going to change, and there's already been some changes to the field as I was preparing for the show today. So if you have not seen, the two withdrawals today were Kevin Chappell and Nick Hardy, and they were replaced by, give me a second, I got it right here. They were replaced by Derek Ernst and Richard S. Johnson. So make sure you have that change put in your memory banks for filling out your lineups tomorrow, any wagers that you were thinking about making. So with that, let's get through the intro so we can figure out our tactics for this week's DFS slate. So the only announcement is that Sunday, probably morning, I'm still trying to figure out the exact time, but Sunday morning, May the 1st, will be my first DFS baseball show. Baseball's always been a passion of mine. I've played all growing up, including on scholarship in college. Still play to this day, so I'm looking forward to that. It'll be a lot of fun. So if you are a baseball fan or want to get into DFS baseball, look for my kind of updates throughout this week as I try to nail down a time when I start my shows for baseball. Right now it's looking like it'll be a Friday, Saturday, Sunday schedule for baseball, as golf is still my primary focus in terms of content. But we're going to have some fun. Looking forward to doing some baseball, and I will post any updates to the time and schedule for Sunday throughout the week. With that, then let's get through the regular intro here. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from fantasynational.com. It is simply the best tool out there, well worth your investment. It's going to make you a much smarter gambler, a much better DFS player. Go check them out. It is well worth your investment. In the descriptions of all of the streaming services, Rumble, YouTube, and Twitch, there are links to my social media where I place betting cards and usually some interesting research that I do throughout the week. With this being the inaugural event for the Mexico Open, it'll just be my betting cards this week, which will be posted after the show tonight. And then finally, we are live. Chat is open. I want to hear from you all. Who are some of the wagers that you have, or what are some of the wagers that you have out already? Who are some of your early pivots and leans and whatnot? We're here for all of that and any other questions you have for the Mexico Open. So with that out of the way, let's figure out our strategies and do our tactics for the 2022 Mexico Open. And we start with the mixed condition model that I ended up making for the week. And to be completely transparent, as probably can guess, with a brand new venue, never been played before, the mixed condition model is, at least by my terms, basic. What I would say is basic. There's not a lot of in-depth, easy, or we don't have paspalum data, so there's no putting on paspalum or anything to that effect. So the only I guess trickle down filter would be on long course here. So let's go through the data model real quick, and then we can talk about the positives and negatives to it, because there is certainly some negatives to this mixed condition model that I made. So the first thing I wanted to do, we do know that it is going to be a long course. It's over 7,400 yards. So I put 10% in strokes gained total over 7,400 yards. I put 15% in off the tee. When we went through the course hole by hole in the initial research show, I kept harping that fairways seemed like they were going to be a premium. And while I still feel like that, with the course being so long, The weather has been dry. It is continuing to be forecasted as dry. That's why I don't have Wind Finder up this evening. Nothing has changed. It's still very hot, very little wind. So on a course that I think fairways and distance is going to matter, you just do off the tee. So I've got 15% in off the tee. I could see an argument absolutely to put something into the effect of maybe 10% off the tee, 5% fairways, or 5% distance, whichever you think is going to be more at play this week. I would tend to lean fairways only because there is trouble left and right, as in lakes, waste areas, and stuff. I don't think this is just going to be a hit it as far as you can type of course. I believe there will be some modicum of having to find fairways. But I went just full 15% in off the tee, 15% in off the approach, 15% in strokes gained approach. It is my preferred statistic. I just believe it's the best for long-term success, or best statistic to indicate long-term success. I wanted to put 20% in here, but being realistic, off the tee is going to matter. I really wanted to focus on some of the par 3 and par 4, par 5 data that we are able to evaluate. So I just have it at 15%. I split up the proximities for 175 to 200 and 200 plus. I still think 200 plus is going to be the majority of approach shots here at Vedanta. So I've got that at 10%. I hedged a little bit, and I put 5% in 175 to 200. Yes, there are quite a few holes that will probably end up having that naturally as an approach length. But if the course is very dry and the run out is exceptionally long, then there aren't going to be too many 200 plus approaches. It'll be more 150, 175, 175 to 200. So this is a bit of a hedge in thinking that, or in acknowledgement of, that the course could be very dry and that the approach shots aren't as long as I think. But 15% in two different proximities, 10% in par 3s, and I went 10% thinking that I really think the par 3s are going to be the most scoreable holes here at Vedanta, minus the drivable par 4 and minus the short par 5 18th. I think the par 3s are going to be where a lot of separation happens. There are two really short par 3s, and one of those is elevated, so it plays very, very short. You've got two total elevated tees. The tournament site mentions mentioned on 2 of the 5 par 3s that these are holes that the players are going to want to attack. Normally, par 3s are some of the more difficult holes on the PGA Tour. That is not the impression I got from the description of the holes on the tournament site. So that's all I have to go on. I think par 3s are going to be some of the more scoreable holes because of that. And if the site is wrong, or if I am interpreting what the site is saying is wrong, then I'll be wrong. But I've got 10% in par 3s. I've got 5% in overall par 4s, 5% in 450 to 500 par 4s, and 5% in 500 plus par 4s. And I mentioned last night at the end of the Data Dive show that I was not sure how I was going to approach or separate my focus on par 4s and the length of the par 4s. I kind of went back and forth, and I mentioned I was debating with myself whether I wanted to use 450 to 500, 500 plus. 4 of the 9 par 4s fall in this length here at Vedanta. There are only 2 here in the 500 plus, but there is a 498 yard par 4, so Really, there's kind of 3 and 3, at least in my mind. So instead of trying to be precise and narrow in exactly on the range or length of par fours, it's kind of a little bit like the proximity. I hedged a little bit. So at least in my mind, I'm doing 10% on each of these because I'm doing 5% on all par fours. So I've got, on the drivable par four, I've got 5%. I've got 5% on the 400 to 450, but then I've got 10% this 5 and this 5 for 450 to 500, and I've got an invisible 10% here on the 500 plus par fours. I still believe that these are going to be the 2 main lengths of par fours that are going to come into play. I just don't know which one it'll be, so I hedged and put 5% in each. And then finally, I was very confident all week. I said it at the end of the initial research on Sunday. I backed it up all last night, the Data Dive show, that I am very confident that the 600 to 650 par fives are going to be the main scoring, at least in terms of par fives. And then I put 10% in the rest of the length of the par fives. Could argue that this can come down to 5%, but generally on a PGA Tour course, par fives are the best and sometimes only scoring opportunities. So just in case that is true here at Vedanta as well, I didn't want to put any less than 10%. But I can understand an argument to lower this to 5%, especially since I have put such a heavy percentage in a specific length. So before I do the reveal of my rankings or whatnot, the pros and cons to this. The pros are that it is pretty simplistic. And it's a con as well. But the pro being simplistic is you're looking at things in totality, especially on a new course with no prior data, no previous exposure. To keep things simple is generally the best way to go about it in your first foray, whether that is looking at tournament stats or any kind of data environment that you're in. You generally don't want to dig right in, and you'll get lost in the weeds and forget what you're even trying to look for if you jump in too quickly. So that's why I generally like keeping things at a very high level in the first go around, and for me that would be a course first go around. Other pros potentially for this data model, other than the simplicity, I mentioned that if I am correct, and it's an if I am correct on the lengths of the par fives being correct or playing the most prominent, if I am correct that the course is going to play very long and 200 plus and 175 to 200 plus approach shots are key, then this model is going to help solidify the players that should perform well. And then if fairways are indeed a big factor, like I think they will be, then off the tee is going to play a big premium. So those are the potential pros. The cons are, at least to me, since I made the data model, pretty obvious, but the first one being putting. I don't have any putting statistics here. Past Palom, we don't get that data anyway, but I don't have any performance in recent putting. So if somebody's carrying a hot putter into this tournament, I won't know that. I don't have any baseline of who's generally just a good putter, other than knowledge that I've stored away in the back of my head. Like, for example, Cameron Champ is generally very streaky. Denny McCarthy, he's not here, but Denny McCarthy is a good putter. Adam Hadwin is a good putter. But other than knowledge that I have stored up here, whatever's left, this model is not going to give that information. So that is potentially one downfall. Another downfall is that if this isn't actually if this is a wedge course, if this becomes a scramble fest per se, I don't have any around the green metrics here. I don't have any short wedge or short yardage approach metrics in here. Something else that is a potential downfall is that if the course is very easy or very difficult, one way or the other, I am certainly going to be losing that specialty or the specialty players, that say, they play better when it's very easy or play better when it's very difficult. I'm going to lose those extremes. While that doesn't sound like much, it can absolutely separate, your DFS contests. It can separate, the guy that you have versus your, fellow contestant having. That is another potential weakness in this data model. So with all of that explained, hopefully I gave you reasons why I made the mixed condition model that I did, and gave you reasons for and against some of the reasons behind it for when you do your own rankings and whatnot. Again, this is a night early. I generally like to, the DFS Tactics shows normally on Wednesday evening, so the projected ownerships are pretty stable, or at least per Fantasy National they're pretty stable. There's not going to be a lot that changes. Doing a night early, I'm just being transparent and giving you the logic behind what I'm using and the potential pros and cons to it. So with that all out of the way, let's go to the rankings. So in a pure numbers stance, my rankings for this week's Mexico Open are Jon Rahm, Austin Smotherman, Chris Kirk, Russell Knox, Aaron Wise, Gary Woodland, Charles Howell III, Tony Finau, Nick Taylor, and Ryan Armour. Kevin Chappell, you see, would be 11th. He is withdrawn, so do not have him. But no surprise who number one is. Best player in the field by far. The heavy betting favorite. He really only has one poor stat, and it's long par fours, 500 plus. Otherwise, number one off the tee, number one approach, number one on long courses, number one on total par four performance. What's there to say? It's Jon Rahm. Austin Smotherman, a little bit of a surprise to me. I thought he would be fairly high in my data model, but not number two. But the numbers back it up, especially, the higher weight up in here. He's 7th in strokes gained approach. He's 20th in strokes gained off the tee. He does not play long courses the best, and his par 4 metrics aren't the best. But his irons from long distance, from 200 plus, very good. He takes advantage of par 5s. He's top 10 in 175 to 200. So if this really does become a long iron based event, he is 8th from 175 to 200 and 2nd in 200 plus. That's going to be pretty difficult to beat in terms of a number perspective. So I really like what Austin Smotherman has to bring to the course if my interpretation is correct about how Vedanta will play. Chris Kirk, Russell Knox, Aaron Wise, just premier ball strikers. I've got this set up to be a ball striking course, so really no surprise here. Gary Woodland, 6th, again another premier ball striker, tied with Jon Rahm for being the best in strokes gained approach in the field. 2nd on long courses, his propensity for long courses well known. Number 1 in the range of par 4s from 450 to 500. It's surprising to see him so low and off the tee, but if there is a little bit of run out, then he'll be fine. So I like Gary Woodland. I like Charles Howell III a lot this week, and so on. So there is a look at the top 10 and a little bit beyond of my rankings, but I'm going to sort this by the salary board. Let's go through the price board and then start making some lineups towards the end of the show. So, pull up the projected ownerships, and again, this is all via FantasyNational.com. So, starting in the 10Ks, you have John Rahm, Tony Finau, Abraham Ancer, Kevin Na, and Patrick Reed. You have two very highly owned or projected owned players, two used players here, and the other three are complete pivots. John Rahm and Tony Finau are the two players being used. John Rahm is actually the second most projected owned player. No surprise. It's a little surprising that he's not first. It is no surprise that he's getting used a ton. He is over, or he's near 21%. Yeah, it's John Rahm in a weak field. But be warned that this, and I heard a couple of radio personalities earlier this week, and they made a fairly good point in the sense that this feels, at least to them, it felt like a little bit like the Fortinet, the first event of the PGA Tour season. And the Fortinet kind of got forgotten because the Ryder Cup was the next week. But John Rahm played in the Fortinet. He missed the cut, but he did play in that event, presumably to keep his game sharp for the Ryder Cup. I can never confirm that. It's not like I have access to John Rahm and can ask him that question. But just because John Rahm is in the field, don't necessarily think it's a mandate that you have to use him, especially with the price and especially with the ownership. Now, I'm not saying he's going to go out there and just hit and giggle and not care what his score is, but there is enough reason to shy away from John Rahm in the sense that like I said, the price is very prohibitive. The ownership is very high. You're taking a chance that if you don't use John Rahm, he is the best player in the field by far. But if you do not use him, you're going to gain a whole lot of leverage on the rest of your contestants in your big GPPs and whatnot. Just because I imagine he'll be so widely owned. I imagine he'll eventually be the most owned player in these contests. I can't imagine him not being number one in ownership, or at least very, very, very close to it. Tony Finau is the other player in the 10Ks getting a lot of use. He's right under 16%. I like Tony Finau. This is a course that should suit him pretty well. Long course. He's very good with his long irons. He's been very good with just strokes gained approach in general. Everyone knows about his tee game. He is getting propped up mainly because I do not have any putting metrics in here. If putting metrics were in, he would fall a little bit, so that gives me a little bit of pause on Tony Finau being 8th. Certainly I wouldn't drop him much more than that, but if there was a little bit of putting, he would probably fall into the high teens area. But it's Tony Finau. He's probably one of the top 5 players in this field. Again, long irons, very good. Irons in general have been pretty good off the tee. But you notice here, he doesn't really have a whole lot of outstanding stats, minus the two obvious here that are in the top 5. He's got a lot of middling to good stats. And in a field like this that is pretty weak, that's actually a valuable commodity. He is not atrocious at any one thing, at least on the metrics that I have. Again, there's no putting, so Tony Finau generally does not rate well on putting. But his worst stat, proximity 175 to 200. How much is that going to play? Probably a little bit, but maybe not a lot. And then long courses, this is the one that is a bother or would give you pause. He is not the best on long courses despite his proclivity to hit the ball far. He just hasn't played long courses the best in the past calendar year. So that's Tony Finau. The other three are big pivots, and two of them I understand why. Like, I'm just not on Patrick Reed. His game is nowhere near what Patrick Reed was. Kevin Na, this just does not feel like a Kevin Na course. Kevin Na is a shorter course. Think of Sony, think of RBC Heritage, courses like that, where he can generally take advantage of his precision and his short game. This does not feel like a Kevin Na course. Abraham Ancer is a little surprising to see him so littly owned, at least on a Tuesday evening. Now, he does not rate out very well in my model, but top 25 and off the tee, he is 6th in par 3s, and if my inclination is correct, and the par 3s are the scoreable holes here at Vedanta, then that's going to suit very well for him. He is number 2 in proximity 175 to 200. He's got a lot of poor stats, to be fair. I mean, long par 4s, atrocious. Long par 5s, not very good. Par 5s in general, not good at all. His long irons are not very good. There's enough reason to be concerned with Abraham Ancer, but to see him at just over 6%, I would have no problem using Abraham Ancer, especially considering it's essentially a home game for him. So that's surprising to see. To me, if I had to rank the 10Ks, I'm probably going Abraham Ancer first, only because he is a pivot. I think he's going to be good enough to justify the probable distance away from Jon Rahm in terms of finishing in the standings. But you're getting $1,000 price discount, and you're getting a third of the ownership. So that is why I will have Abraham Ancer first. Probably going to have Jon Rahm second in the 10Ks, and then Tony Finau. I'm not going anywhere near Kevin Na and Patrick Reed. Let's move to the 9Ks. You've got Gary Woodland, Sebastian Munoz, Cameron Tringale, Chris Kirk, Aaron Wise, Cameron Champ, Brendan Todd, Russell Knox, Kevin Streelman, and Matt Jones. The most projected owned player is in this range. It's Gary Woodland, just over 22%. Makes a lot of sense. Long course. He's been number 1 with Jon Rahm on strokes gained approach. He's number 2 behind Jon Rahm on long courses in the field. Best at 400. Best on par 4s, 450 to 500. Number 2 in overall par 4s. Par 5s, he's fantastic. There's a lot to like with Gary Woodland. It kind of stinks to see him at 22%. I knew he'd be chalky, but not 22%. Kind of stinks, but I can't avoid. I can't not use Gary Woodland. It's just a good play this week, I think. You've got Sebastian Munoz, 60.5%. A lot to like. Off the tee, been very, very good. Approaches, almost top 20, 21st. Top 5 in proximity 175 to 200. Top 5 in par 4s, 450 to 500. Now, the long par 5s give him trouble. The long par 4s give him trouble. So there's enough to be worried about Sebastian Munoz. But, if you get Sebastian Munoz at 6% less ownership than Gary Woodland, that's saying a lot. Let's see. Kirk, Wise, Tringale. Tringale's kind of getting middling. He's getting a little bit lost, and this is kind of my bold call, I guess, if you will. I am off Tringale. I'm generally a big Cameron Tringale backer. I'm just not there with him this week. And this could be, the time I rue not backing Cameron Tringale. But the long course metrics are not good at all. He is terrible at the long par 5s. He is very bad at the long par 4s. Like Sebastian Munoz above him, the difference is Munoz is good off the tee. Tringale is horrible off the tee, or at least since the beginning of the calendar year. Par 5s are bad. Long par 5s, again, bad. So I'm just off at Tringale this week. The other two that are getting used in the 9Ks, Chris Kirk, Aaron Wise, make a whole lot of sense. Third and fifth in my data model. Aaron Wise, I can probably get away from in DFS only because he is an outright wager for me. So my choice of exposure to Aaron Wise is in an outright win bet as opposed to DFS. But if you use him in DFS, I'm not going to say it's a good decision to make. So if you are anywhere in, I mean, you're going to be in the 10 and 9Ks, but unless you are going to be using Abraham Answer and then coming down under Aaron Wise, you're going to be pretty chalky. So you got to make sure you find your uniqueness somewhere. Let's see. So I highlighted Gary Woodland's at 22%. Munoz is just above 16. Kirk and Wise are hovering around 16.5%. So I'm off of Tringali, but you got Cameron Champ, who's right at 10%. And Cameron Champ never rates out well in my model, and he is 27th this week. A lot of that being predicated on off the tee, sure. But his long irons, generally very good. He takes advantage of par fives. Now, the proximity with 175 to 200, the par fours, not the best. And again, he's getting propped up a little bit because there's no putting metrics, kind of like Tony Finau. The irons have not been good, and he's really bad at par threes. So there's enough to be worried with Cameron Champ, but a lot of the pundits around, or at least that I've heard, really like Cameron Champ this week. So I don't know if I'll have, I don't have an outright win bet on him like some of the others, so my exposure would have to come in DFS. He is just such a Jekyll and Hyde player. He can go out and win, and he can go out and shoot 80, 79 and kill your lineup. So it is saying something that he is rated so well in my model when he's generally in the triple digits. So I don't mind him. I'll use some Cameron Champ, especially as he's at 10%. The only other player that's getting some love in the 9Ks is Matt Jones, and I don't understand the amount of love that he's getting. He is above 13%. Now, I think it's in a vacuum, it would have been a fine play. 13% is way too much. Now, he is fantastic on long courses, yes, but there is a whole lot of just not stellar stats to look at here. I mean, the off the tee and the approach, while they're both above field average, they're certainly in the good, not great or excellent. Bad at the par threes, bad on long par fives, bad on long par fours. I'm just not there at 13%. Now, if it were at 10%, I might say a little different about Matt Jones. But 13%, that's a fade for me. The person I like right above him, Kevin Streelman. He does not get enough credit. He's, kind of a everyday, kind of like I was going to say like an everyday player, but a lunch pail, just kind of blue collar, come get your work done and go home type of guy. He does not get enough credit for how well he plays long courses. If it gets difficult, he can play them very well when it's difficult. Now, he missed the cut at the Heritage, but he had a run there of 4 or 5 tournaments where he was top 25. Going back to the Honda, difficult course, not long but difficult. Top 20, misses the cut at the Arnold Palmer, then top 25 of the Players, top 10 at the Valspar, top 20 at the Valero. So Kevin Streelman does not get enough credit for being good at long courses. When it gets difficult, he's pretty good. I really like Streelman this week for DFS at 9,100 and a pivot at that at the same ownership actually as Abraham Answer, both at a little over 6%. So there's my look at the 9Ks. I love Russell Knox. He's middling percent owned. Champ's okay. I would much prefer Knox than Champ, but both are fine. It's going to be hard for me not to use Gary Woodland. I can fade Aaron Wise in DFS only because me personally, I have an outright win wager on him, so that's my exposure. If you take Aaron Wise, it's a good decision. I'm not telling you to fade him just because I have a win wager on him. That's the exposure I've chosen. So there's a look at the 9Ks. Let's move to the 8s. You've got Doug Gim, Sahith Theegala, Aaron Wright, Carlos Ortiz, Davis Riley, CH3, Lonto, Taylor Moore, CT Pan, and Mark Hubbard. You've got one guy? No. So you only have a couple of middling players here, middling used players. Everybody else is a pivot. So it seems like the 8Ks is where your fellow contestants are starting to ignore this part of the price board. So it feels like your contestants are using two in the top end, say a Rom and a Wise or a Finau Woodland start, and then moving their way down. So in the 8Ks, you have three players hovering in between 10 and 11%. Everybody else is lower than that. So Aaron Rye at 10.8% or so. Aaron Rye, I like. Yeah, I mean, number one in long irons, coming off of a pretty darn good Zurich Classic. I believe his partner was Lipsky. Somebody can correct me in chat, but I believe his partner was Lipsky. They played well. He's very good at par fives, very good at long par fives, speaking to the 200 plus proximity prowess. Good on long courses, so a lot to like with Aaron Rye. He's at 10.7. CH3, 10.5%. I really like Charles Howell III this week. Number 2 on long par fours. He's great on long courses. Now the off the tee and approach game, a little bit lacking, kind of like it was with Matt Jones. But you're getting CH3 at 3% less ownership or close to it than Matt Jones. And like I said with Matt Jones, if he was hovering around 10%, I might be singing a different tune. Well, it's just Charles Howell. And you're getting Charles Howell at $600 less on the price board. So I really like Charles Howell. And then the only other player above 10% in the 8Ks is CT Pan. He rates 12th in my model, and I'm low on CT Pan. I mean, I know the numbers say it should be okay. This does not feel like a CT Pan course. He is like Kevin Na. He wants, or at least when he's performed his best, he has been on these precision style tracks. Not necessarily short game, but precision, like an RBC Heritage. Let's see, other places that he has played well at generally, like Honda. Even though it's difficult, it's generally precision based. The Fortinet is another good one as well. But to be fair, Sanderson Farms is very long, and he played well this fall there. So maybe there's a subtle shift in game towards or on CT Pan. I mean, his irons have been very good lately. He's gained, I'll be kind, round this up to a half. So he's gained a half a stroke or more on the field in approach in the past 5 events. He's getting propped up a lot because I don't have any putting statistics in the data model. The off the tee is Jekyll and Hyde. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm just not as high on CT Pan as maybe the mixed condition model says I should be. And he's at 10%, so he's getting a little bit of love in this area of the price board. But some other players I want to highlight for you all. Sahith Theegala, I mentioned him last night in the Data Dive show. Now he rates out low because of the irons. I don't think the irons are this bad. You've seen he has been able to compete on numerous leaderboards here early in his professional career. It's not supposed to be windy. He'll be fine with that. Again, like I said, I just don't think the irons are this bad. If they are, sure, I'll be wrong. But, I mean, he gained 4 at Phoenix. He gained 1.5 at the Valspar. Both of those are top 10. So anytime his irons are clicking, he's been top 10ing. He can go ice cold, or sorry, he can get hot and cold with the best of them with the putter. Get a hot week with the putter. The irons click. I mean, you can say that about anybody, but Sahith Theegala has the game to actually go out and win a tournament. I like Sahith Theegala for DFS. He is right at 9%. Doug Gim right above him, ball striker extraordinaire. Does not like the long courses, but anytime you have strokes gain approach this high, decent off the tee numbers, and decent long irons, yeah, I like Doug Gim this week. Let's see, other players in the 8Ks that we didn't talk about. Carlos Ortiz, if you want to believe in the home, quote, home game narrative, I'm not there this week. He's just not been playing well lately. I mean, just what's this? 4 straight miscuts, API, the players, Valspar, Heritage. Again, you're going on the home game narrative, and that's a fine narrative to play. I'm just not there with it. Lonto Griffin, fine. But in the 8Ks, like I said, I'm going to be using Aaron Rye. I'll be using a whole lot of CH3. I like Gim. I like Theegala. I don't mind Lonto Griffin. It's just kind of lukewarm. Even though CT Pan's so high in my rankings, I'm generally pretty low on CT Pan. So there's a look at the 8Ks. Let's move to the high 7s. You've got Lahiri, Chad Ramey, Austin Smotherman, Adam Long, Scott Stallings, David Lipsky, Wyndham Clark, Patrick Rodgers, Nate Lashley, JT Poston, and Pat Perez. There is one player, you can see Austin Smotherman ranked second. And I talked about him at the top 10 or the reveal of my top 10. There is one player that is criminally underrated in my data model. It's Chad Ramey. We talked about him at the end of the Data Dive show last night, how he has played the 2 comparison courses so very well. He ties for 5th at the Puerto Rico. He wins the Corrales. He is getting hammered down by the off the tee, or the poor off the tee performance and the poor strokes gain approach numbers. Remember, Puerto Rico and Corrales, we don't get the off the tee, the approach, the putting numbers. So those are basically washes. I can guarantee you, because I watched him, and just overall finish would dictate that he was very good, at least with the irons, in those 2 tournaments, especially the Corrales. He was just lighting it up at the Corrales. So, but even so, he's number 2 on long courses. He's number 2 on par 5s. He is number 4 on long par 5s. Now, Chad Ramey doesn't have a lot of distance, but the Corrales, he wasn't reaching those par 5s in 2. He was taking advantage of his precision and his elite wedge game. So this is what I was referring to in the pros and the cons of my data model. Something that doesn't account for Chad Ramey. He plays par 5s generally as 3-shot par 5s, and has very good wedges, and generally makes his fair share of putts, and he made a lot of them at the Corrales, and he won. So if this does indeed become a wedge contest where the par 5s are not reachable, then Chad Ramey needs to get a whole lot of a boost in your rankings. I think he's too low in mine, again, just due to the numbers and the fact that the 2 15% that I have in my data model, he's really bad at from the stats that we can gather. But Chad Ramey is not 47th. I'm not going to consider him 47th in my data model. So Austin Smotherman and Chad Ramey, I like them a lot. I like them both a lot. I still think I like Austin Smotherman more than Chad Ramey, to be honest. There's a lot to like with Austin Smotherman. The irons, very, very good. Off the tee, very good. Number 2 on approaches from 200 plus. He's top 5 on par 5s, top 10 on 175 to 200. So if the inclination that it is a 200 or a long iron approach based course, then Austin Smotherman should be very good. So those two I really like. I like Audubon Lahiri right above him at 7,900. In the high sevens, you've got one player getting a whole lot of use. It's Austin Smotherman. He's at 14.5%. He's number 2 in my data model. I don't know if I can get away from him. That is very, very chalky. So if you don't want to play the chalk, take a look at Chad Ramey, $100 more. Take a look at Audubon Lahiri, $100 more. Both doing things differently than Austin Smotherman, where Smotherman is the long iron play. You know, Chad Ramey is going to be if the par 5s aren't attackable, and you are banking on it being a kind of a 3-shot or a wedge game this week. Lahiri, kind of the same with Austin Smotherman in the terms of the tee game. Now, what you're getting with Lahiri is the long course prowess, long par 4s, long par 5s, because Austin Smotherman has not played long courses well. Lahiri has at least played them okay, but especially takes advantage of long par 5s and long par 4s. So take a look at Lahiri and Ramey if you want to get away from the Smotherman chalk. To be fair, I'm going to probably use Ramey and Smotherman a lot, but in the same lineups sometimes too. I'm just really high on those players. Everybody else in the high sevens is 9% or lower. Take a look at Nate Lashley. I talked about him quite a bit last night in the Data Dive show. He is very good at all of the proximities. Whether this becomes a wedge game from 75 to 100 or is a long iron contest, 200 plus and 175 to 200. He is good at all of them. He is very good on long courses. His irons have been good. Now the off the tee, not great. He's not good on long par 4s or long par 5s, but he has been good on long courses. So something's going to have to balance out or change there for the numbers to make sense. Either he's not going to be as good on the long course, or he's going to get better at the long par 4s and par 5s. One of those two things are going to have to happen. But I like Nate Lashley. I think these will start getting better and match this. So there's a look at the high sevens. Let's move to the low sevens here. We've got Alex Smalley, Rafa Cabrera-Bello, Brandon Wu, Adam Svensson, Grayson Sigg, Brian Stewart, Tyler Duncan, Kramer Hickok, Michael Thompson, Emiliano Grillo, Scott Piercy, Nick Taylor, Kitayama, Joseph Bramlett, Chase Seifert, Danny Lee, Graham McDowell, Robert Streb, Peter Uihlein, Nick Hardy, John Hunt, Andrew Putnam, and Matt Wallace. Well, I got into the middle of reading all those names to get through it. Nick Hardy has withdrawn. I did successfully skip Kevin Chappell. He is out, and Nick Hardy has withdrawn as well. But in the low sevens, you've got 2 guys getting some use, 3 guys getting some use. Everybody else is 8.5% or lower. So the 3 guys getting any kind of use, you've got Adam Svensson at roughly 10.7 or so percent. You've got Tyler Duncan at 11% and Joseph Bramlett at 10.5%. So really, Joseph Bramlett are where your fellow contestants are bottoming out. No one below Joseph Bramlett is above 6%. So your fellow contestants are bottoming out at Joseph Bramlett. I like Joseph Bramlett. He's fine. Take a look at Nick Taylor. Very good when on long courses, very good with the irons. His off the tee game has generally been pretty good lately. Take a look at Nick Taylor. I was all over him at the Corrales. He had a pretty poor Sunday, but he was he was there all week. Our API, another long course, he played very, very well. Honda, difficult, he played well. So take a look at Nick Taylor. The irons have been getting steadily better. Again, he's getting propped up a little bit by the no putting in the model. So if he is anywhere near field average, it's going to be a good week for him, given that the irons stay somewhat consistent. The off the tee game has always been field average, generally a little bit better. So I like Nick Taylor. Take a look at him. Brian Stewart, I always highlight him when he's in the 6Ks. 7-3, I'm not as high on Brian Stewart this week as I normally am. Who I am high on is Brandon Wu. He is at the 7,300 mark. There he is. So Brandon Wu, just like Chad Ramey, Brandon Wu played the two comparison course events or similar style events very, very well. He was, I believe, third at the Puerto Rico and 18th at the Corrales. He has played long courses well. Par fours, good. Par fives, good. Now, he's in trouble if the par threes are the biggest factor here at Vedanta. But take a look at Brandon Wu. He is sitting at 5%. I like him quite a bit this week if you're wanting to get away from the quote Adams Vincent chalk, the Tyler Duncan chalk, chalk meaning in this area. 11% and 10.5%. They aren't. That's not chalky in terms of grand total or in the grand scheme of the player board. But in this area, they're chalky. So I like Brandon Wu. Let's see. Nick Taylor, I mentioned. I don't mind Joseph Bramlett. All these others, you can see that they're starred. They're in the top half of my rankings. But I really wanted to highlight Brandon Wu for you all and highlight Nick Taylor for you all. So in the 6Ks, this is a tournament that that I actually feel like I found some good 6Ks for you all, and that scares me because the past 2 or 3 events, I have mentioned that there haven't been a lot in the 6Ks that I've liked. So in the 6Ks, take a look at Ben Martin for the par 5 prowess, the long par 5s. And he plays long course as well. He top 5'd the Corrales this past year. Take a look at him. Ryan Armour generally plays these events very, very well. You can see really his only poor stat are par 5s. So if the par 5s are neutered in importance, that's going to play into Ryan Armour's hands. I mean, 2nd in par 4s, 7th in par 4s from 450 to 500. His irons have been very good. His off the tee game has been very good. So give a long look to Ryan Armour. Going lower in the price board, take a look at a couple of guys in the 6,200s. David Lingmerth, I mentioned him all last night in the Day to Die show. This is all predicated on the performance in similar style courses, comparison courses. He was, I'll just check. I believe he was, so he top 20'd the Puerto Rico and 44th, tied for 44th at Corrales. So he's averaging a top 30 in the 2 tournaments, are actually averaging a top 25. He's played those events well. He's been playing well in measured rounds before the Bermuda, the Puerto Rico, and the Corrales. Take a look at David Lingmerth. I'm not advocating that you rush to put him on every lineup, but if you're looking to save some money at 6,200, I like David Lingmerth and I like Jared Wolf quite a bit. Jared Wolf, if the par 3s are a big factor, he's 3rd in those. He's number 1 in proximity 175 to 200. He is top 10 on long par 5s. He's played par 5s he's played long courses generally pretty well. So there are 2 names here at 6,200 both, Wolf and Lingmerth, that if you are looking to save some money, I am actually pretty comfortable coming down here to squeeze in a Lingmirth or Wolf comfortable coming down to a Lingmirth or a Wolf if I'm trying to squeeze in a Rom and a Finau, or a Finau Woodland Wise, something along those lines. So that is a look at the price board in its entirety. We are going to switch over now to Microsoft Excel, and let's start making some lineups here. Transition, bring up that. All right, so I've got this sorted by price. So first, for those who play tiers contests, and I am not the most familiar with tiers. I know I'm looking away, sorry, just making sure chat stays up. I'm not familiar with tiers. So all I can go on is the ownerships are roughly the same as Classic. And that's the approach that I'm going to have to take. So for those playing tiers, Tier 1, you have John Rahm, Tony Finau, and Abraham Ancer. Rahm's going to be the most chalky, probably the best play. Yeah, I think it's going to have to be Rahm. I mean, you can create a narrative on all three of these guys. I mean, Ancer the home game. Finau is the pivot off of Rahm, but I think in the tiers, I think it's just Rahm. I think it's just John Rahm. Tier 2, Kevin Na, Patrick Reed, Sebastian Munoz, Cameron Tringale, and Chris Kirk. For me, it's probably Chris Kirk. I don't mind Sebastian Munoz. I am nowhere near the other three. Tier 3, Gary Woodland, Aaron Wise, Cameron Champ, Brendan Todd, and Kevin Streelman. I really like Kevin Streelman, but in a loaded tier like this, for me, I'm probably going to go Gary Woodland, although Aaron Wise and Cameron Champ are also good choices, but I'm going to go Gary Woodland. So I've, at least in tiers, I've eaten chalk on John Rahm and Gary Woodland. I am Kirk or Munoz, they're both going to be pretty chalky, so I imagine I'm going to have to be very, very unique in the tier 4, 5, and 6 if I were to play a tiers. So tier 4, you got Russell Knox, Matt Jones, Doug Gim, Aaron Rai, Carlos Ortiz, CH3, and Lonto Griffin. Now there are 3 or 4 players I really like in tier 4. I really like Russell Knox, ball striker. He's been hitting his irons amazing. He's been getting off the tee well on a course that I think will be a ball striker's course. I really like Russell Knox. I like Doug Gim for a lot of the same reasons. I like Aaron Rai. I like Charles Howell III. If you're going to go with the home game narrative, Carlos Ortiz, I'm just not there. For me, in tier 4, oh boy, I'm probably going to go Russell Knox first, followed closely by Charles Howell III, then Aaron Rai, and then Doug Gim, but all 4 are pretty good choices, at least in my mind. But I think I would rank those 4 like that. Tier 5, Tagala, Davis Riley, Taylor Moore, C.T. Pan, Mark Hubbard, Chad Ramey, and Adam Long. I'm going to go with Chad Ramey. Just the success on similar style events. He's already played 2 Caribbean courses. He's top 5'd them both. Tagala would be a very good speculative play, I think. And then, C.T. Pan, Taylor Moore. I generally like Taylor Moore a lot. He just doesn't rate out well this week. Mark Hubbard, is okay. Lukewarm. I don't feel great. Good or bad. Just, So for me, I'm going Chad Ramey in tier 5. Tier 6, you got Lahiri, Smotherman, Stallings, Lipsky, Wyndham Clark, Patrick Rogers, and JT Poston. I imagine Austin Smotherman will be the chalky play. And if I hadn't taken so much chalk up in the first 2 or 3 tiers, I would take Austin Smotherman here. But because I'm trying to simulate if I were to make a lineup, because I took the chalk in these 3 tiers, I'm actually going to go with David Lipsky, another fantastic ball striker. The quote correct or best play is probably Austin Smotherman. But just because of the lineup I constructed going through this, I'm going to take David Lipsky. So there's a look at the tiers. Let's move on to start making some classic lineups here. Let's see. Let me get situated here, adjust the keyboard. That way I can at least somewhat look at the camera and type at the same time. So in your big GPP contests, let's just assume that your fellow contestants are going to be using John Rahm. He is the second most owned player. So if they're going John Rahm, they're probably coming all the way down to an Aaron Wise or a Chris Kirk in the mid-9s. I'm just going to go with Aaron Wise to save them as much money as I can. And then we saw that they're bottoming out at Joseph Bramlett. And that does not leave them a whole lot of wiggle room, as you can see. With this defined boundary, you've got Bramlett at 71, and you've got three players basically at 7,400 that they're trying to fit in if they're using a John Rahm. And again, at the 6Ks, there is nobody getting a whole lot of use. I think Vincent Whaley's the highest here at 6,800 with 6.2. I mean, nobody has been coming down into the 6Ks yet. And that's the problem, and this is why I like to do the DFS Tactics show on Wednesdays, to try to get as much data as we can. I just can't make it happen for obvious reasons I've been saying all week. But with that being the case, if the ownerships were to stay like this for now, then they're going Joseph Bramlett. They probably go something like Tyler Duncan or maybe Adam Svensson. But Tyler Duncan, actually they would probably have to go with Adam Svensson as well. So the three low 7s that are getting any kind of love, and then they're at 7,600 here. That's a Wyndham Clark, a Patrick Rogers. It's not leaving them much in the way in terms of money. So if they're not going John Rahm, Aaron Wise, let's still say that they're going Joseph Bramlett, because that is the highest owned player, low-ish in the price board. They're probably coming down into the 8s, where somebody like, say maybe, I said 8s, maybe Matt Jones at 9, and then Austin Smotherman. This is giving them a little bit more of some wiggle room here. They're at 7,400 per, depending on who your fellow contestants prefer. If they do, say, a Tyler Duncan, that leaves them 76. That same 76, maybe they go Adam Svensson and bump up Matt Jones to 93. That's Brendan Todd. He's not getting a lot of love. Russell Knox. Yeah, see, like Aaron Wise would be at 95. They would need to lose 200 somewhere. Now I'm just not seeing where that would be. So that's the case if they're using John Rahm. And that's why I said at the beginning of the price board, like John Rahm's just so prohibitive because of his price, and people are using him so much. It's just tough to use John Rahm in a field like this. It just is. So if they're not going John Rahm, let's move them down to, say, Tony Finau without the asterisk or apostrophe. We're still gonna. I always try to use different players, but it is what it is. Joseph Bramlett is the lowest or the highest owned player, low in the price board. So now this gives them a little bit more breathing room here. I'll use Chris Kirk instead of Aaron Wise just to switch up the names. They're $100 difference in price and 0.2 ownership projection difference, so they're kind of interchangeable. So Tony Finau, Chris Kirk. Let's move them up to, let's see, you had Svensson at 7.3. I mean, I guess Nate Lashley is getting a little bit of love at 75. To be fair, that's probably going to have to go here. 72 is Duncan. 73 is Svensson. We'll just say Svensson. Just throwing out some names here. So that's at 81. You've got C.T. Pan, who's getting a little bit of love. Mark Hubbard at 8,000 is getting some love. Of course, Austin Smotherman. That's matching at 13%. The other lineup construction that seems like it's getting a little bit of run is a sort of Gary Woodland, Chris Kirk / Aaron Wise, Matt Jones kind of look, with again Joseph Bramlett being their bottom. So let's see. What did I spell wrong? There we go. So 7,200 again. This is the Adams, Vincent, Tyler Duncan kind of range. Those are the kind of lineups that are kind of being built around, and it's really kind of tough. It's kind of all or nothing. So if you're willing to dip into the 6Ks, and I gave you some names that I kind of like. If you want to use John Rahm, there's nothing wrong with that. But to use John Rahm, you're gonna have to probably come down into the 6Ks. I highlighted Ben Martin for you on the par 5 premise. Let's see. The other players that I kind of like down here, where are they? There were some at 6,200. I really thought there was one in the mid sixes. I don't really see him. So I mentioned Ben Martin, and I mentioned the two at 6,200, Lingmerth and oh gosh, now I'm drawing a blank. Sorry, I'm going to have to scroll. 6,200, Lingmerth, Jared Wolf. Sorry. Only because I've been mentioning him all week. I'll use David Lingmerth. Now this gives us quite a bit of room to maneuver here. And I'm going to go extremely against the grain here. I'm going to use Abraham Answer and try to squeeze in 2 10Ks, especially since I used 6,200 David Lingmerth. By squeezing in an Abraham Answer, one, I'm trying to be extra unique because I don't think many players are going to try to find 2 10Ks. If by doing this, if I can avoid going into the 6Ks again, I will. Again, I don't have a problem coming down into the 6,800 Ben Martin, 6,900 Ryan Armour range. Don't want to use 2 of them, but I will to try to keep myself unique. But let's try to use a Brandon Wu instead of a 6K guy. We'll come up to Brandon Wu. We still have 7,500. So, yes, he is still a bit chalky for the area, but I love Nate Lashley this week. It still gives us 7,400. This is, an Alex Smalley, a Rafa Cabrera Bello, if you like. If you are, willing to use 2 6Ks, I'll just use Ryan Armour for an example. This gives us up to 78. Yes, he's very, very chalky, but he's number 2 in my data model. Like there's a lineup here. You go Rahm Answer. I don't think too many of your contestants will squeeze in 2 10Ks, so that is unique in of itself. You've got Lingmerth, who has played the 2 comparison course events very well. I'm not going to say he's going to go out and top 10 this tournament, but at 6,200, if he, top 30s, like he's averaged at the 2 other events, or even, top 40s, that's going to be useful for DFS. Ryan Armour has played these events well. Austin Smotherman and Nate Lashley. That's a lineup that I would be extremely comfortable submitting, and I'm matching less than 10% of a big GPP field. And that's with the condition that you actually want to use Rahm. Like if you're comfortable not using John Rahm, then that opens up a whole lot of options. What I'm going to suggest, I don't suggest starting your team with Abraham Answer. If you're going to use Abraham Answer, I think you combine him with Tony Finau or John Rahm and squeeze 2 10Ks in, because I think if people are going to pivot away from Rahm and away from Finau, they're going to just use Answer as their 10K. And that's why I am advocating that you combine Abraham Answer with another 10K to keep yourself unique in that aspect and find your values or your I guess I should say your uniqueness elsewhere. I mean, Answer is unique, but you're having to combine him with a John Rahm or a Tony Finau who is not unique. He's pretty chalky. So, but if you're comfortable getting away from John Rahm, I mean, this opens a whole lot of opportunities. You know, I'll start a team with Sebastian Munoz only because I'll try to avoid the Gary Woodland chalk. But if you go somewhat like Sebastian Munoz, Cameron Champ, shoot in the high eights, you know, I like Aaron Rai. This gives you a whole lot of room to maneuver as well. Let's see, I highlighted Ryan Armour at 6,900. Let's use Vaughn Taylor. Ben Martin was 6,900 as well. Sorry, I thought he was 68. So I'll just use Ben Martin just to throw out a different name. Ben Martin, Ryan Armour. You've got 7,600 here. I don't mind Chad Ramey. I've been talking him up a lot tonight. This is leaves you at 7,300. This is Adam Svensson. This is Brandon Wu, Grayson Sigg. You know, I'll just use Adam Svensson because he's the one getting the most love. I mean, I chose the most chalky option there, and I'm still under 10%, getting a balanced-ish looking lineup with Aaron Rai, who's got great form, Chad Ramey having top 5 the other two similar style events, Ben Martin top 5 the Corrales, the same tournament Chad Ramey won. Svensson has been ball striking it well. You're going on the narrative that putting isn't a big deal. Same with Cameron Champ, so you've got that narrative riding. So there is a look at a couple of the lineups that I've been playing around with, some of the guys that I'm trying to maneuver in and out of lineups. Thanks for tuning in. Really appreciate the support. I apologize that it is a night early, so some of this data will change. Doing the best I can for you. But in the comments of the videos, YouTube, Twitch, Rumble, let me know how you do this week. I might be on vacation, but I'll clearly be still plugged in and checking to see how my teams do and my wagers are doing and all that. So drop a comment. I want to know who you used. Did you go with Abraham Answer if he stays like a pivot? Did you go into the 6Ks at all? How the lineups are doing and such. So for all of your wagers that you have this week at the Mexico Open, for all of the DFS contests you enter this week at the Mexico Open, for this weekend and every weekend, may all your bets be profitable.